Yeah.
Okay, we're going to begin. It's Daf Kuf test today, and we're going to begin on Daf Kuf Ches Amid Sheni, 4 lines from the bottom. It begins Tanu Rabbanim. So the Gemara says over here, Tanu Rabbanim, the rabbis taught, Hakol Chayovim Ba'arba Kaisis, Halalu. Everybody is obligated to drink the 4 cups on Seder night, Echad Anoshim, whether it's a man, V'echad Noshim women, and we learned the reason before, Sha'af Hein Hoya Bois and Anes. And a small child. It doesn't mean a baby. It means a child that is bar chinuch. You have to be mechanechim in wine. So the Tanakama holds the reason why you have to be mechanechim in wine, even though children don't drink wine, it's actually repulsive to them. You still have to be mechanech them to drink the wine, not to drink grape juice. Try to give them a little bit lighter tasting wine. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. What are they going to gain by drinking wine? They're not going to gain from it. So Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient on the chinuch aspect that for this mitzvah, if a child doesn't want to drink, you don't have to push him. But the accepted opinion is that the Tanakama says that the mechayev to bring, right? So the Gemara says, Ella, what do you do? Rabbi Yehuda has another idea how to get the children involved, and not just by drinking wine. Machalken lehen, you have to distribute kiloyos, which is roasted wheat, which was like a snack, the egoism and walnuts, be'er Pesach, an Erev Pesach, and that means the night of Pesach, that they should not sleep and they should be up, v'yishalu, and ask the question. In other words, you give them sweets and candies early on in the evening, and then they're going to stay up for the Seder, and they're going to ask, normally we get these kind of treats at the end of the meal, and you're giving it to me before the meal. And once you start doing strange things, that fires up their mind to start thinking of asking about what other strange things are we going to do tonight. And that's the point of the whole night, is to get them to ask a question. And each year you should be creative in how to get children to ask a question. And that's how, when you respond to a question, that's how they'll remember it more and learn about it better than it's just being one dry thing, one after another. The Gemara continues, Amru Olav al Rabbi Akiva, they said about Rabbi Akiva, Shoyamachale Kloyes ve'egoizem ve'era Pesach. Rabbi Akiva said he would distribute by his Seder candies, or like kloyes, again the roasted wheat, ve'egoizem latinokas ve'era Pesach, k'delei shlo yishnu, so that they won't fall asleep, v'yishalu, and ask. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Reb Lezer says a fascinating thing. What should you do on the night of the Seder? If your kid, you just sat down for the Seder, you finished the Haggadah, now you're eating your matzah, choytfin matzahs b'leilei Pesachim. You grab it away from the child on the night of Pesach. Now, before the child fills himself up, that's the point. Because if your child will eat a lot of matzah in the Seder, he's going to fall asleep and not stay up for the rest of the Seder. So choytfim, you grab it away from them. That's what the Rav says. Choytfim, misalkin eslechem miyad hatinoikis, shelo yehishem etoich ma'achal harba. If you feed them, they don't know how what's enough. They'll overeat, and then they won't. They're not going to ask any questions. But when you grab it away and you prevent them from eating so much, they're not going to sleep, and they're gonna wake up. They're gonna ask questions. That's the shita of Rashbam, which is Rashi's grandson, Shad. But Rashi, what we have as Rashi says choytfim matzah. He learns that the word choytfim means matbiyin asakara b'shvilat tinokis sheyishalu. You lift up that seder plate, so that choytfim means you grab it or lift it. I don't know. Then Rashi brings another opinion. The istam afarish choytfim means oichlim maher. This is very interesting. You shouldn't have that seder going to 3 a.m. You should eat quickly, so everybody gets a chance to say everything in the Haggadah book. And then Rashi says that is Lashon Ikar. That is the main shot. Choytfim matzahs doesn't mean you eat quickly, doesn't mean just matzah. You eat quickly the supper so that you can continue your Seder to finish at a normal hour. Tanya, and that's why it connects to what the Gemara is saying now. Tanya, how important it is to try to push yourself to stay up through the whole Seder. Amru Olav Rabbi Akiva, they said about Rabbi Akiva, Yamav loy Amar Higia Eis Lama Beveis Medrash. He never told anybody to stop learning in the base medrash. You want to learn to all hours of the morning, he had no problem with that. Chutz mi Arvei Pesachim, on Erev Pesach, the Erev Yom Kippur. And Erev Yom Kippur, he told the boys to leave the yeshiva. Why Erev Pesach? By Arvei Pesachim. B'shil Tanoikis Kidei Shloi Yishnu. I guess the parents, the koilel boys, the koilel should go home and make sure that their children should sleep. And only a father can put a kid to sleep. A mother, during the day, that is. A mother, the kid will not listen. But the father comes home and says, you're sleeping now, Erev Pesach in the afternoon, the kid will listen. And that's Rabbi Kiva forced his students to go home to put their kids to sleep. And why did he force them to go home on Erev Yom Kippurim? Kidei she'achilu es b'neihem, so that they should give to eat their children. Pashtus is because we know that Erev Yom Kippur there's a mitzvah to eat on Yom Kippur, and therefore there's a mitzvah to eat on Yom Kippur. I guess the father will go home and help his kids eat to mekayim that mitzvah. They shouldn't look at Erev Yom Kippur as a regular day. No, they have to eat with the kedusha and a su'uda like Erev Yom Kippur requires. There is an opinion of Tosfos that says he doesn't, like I told you just now, that the reason why the Rabbi Akiva told his students go home on Erev Pesach is so that to put the kids to sleep. So Tosfos doesn't like that. He says, "V'loi nehira," I don't like that. Da'atu lo yukla lishim b'loi abihem. Can't you trust your wife to put the kids to sleep? Why does the father have to come home to put his kid to sleep? So then Tosfos says at the end, I think it means Leilei Pesachim. And it talks about that the rabbi used to give a speech after the davening. They would learn in the Beis Medrash on the night of Pesach, the night of the Seder. So he'd say, "Go home. Now's not a time to learn in the Beis Medrash. You have to go home and start your Seder." Tanu Rabbanim, the rabbis taught, "Chayev Adam lesameach bonov ubnei beisai beregel." A person has to make his family happy on Yontif. It's not enough. Here you can be mechayev to make them happy. Shenama, it says the pasuk, v'somachta bechagecha, and it's not the right pasuk. It's a different pasuk, but we read it as you have to make your family, ato bincha bintecha v'avdecha. You have to make everybody happy in the family on Yontif. So the Gemara asks, b'mem b'samchem, how do you make people happy? Bayayin, with wine. In other words, to make yourself happy, you have to buy some nice wine for Yom Tov. And this is the Daraisa, it's not the Rabbanan we're talking about over here. It's drashin from the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda says, Anoshim b'roy ulehem. You make people, a men happy, what makes them happy. V'noshim b'roy ulehem. And with women, you give them what's appropriate. Anoshim b'roy lehem, men you give what's appropriate to them. What makes a man happy? Bayayin, wine. V'noshim b'mai, what makes a woman happy? So it depends where you live. Tanu Rab Yosef b'Bavel b'Big Deitzavon. If you lived in Bavel, you got colored clothing, right? Because I guess color, dyeing clothing was not so common in Bavel. So giving your wife a blue blouse was something, a novelty there. Eretz Yisrael, what was a novelty for a woman to buy? What kind of clothing? With pressed linen clothing. So with pressed linen clothing, which was not so common in Eretz Yisrael, linen didn't grow there. So there, if you get in Eretz Yisrael, you get that clothing for your wife. You mekayim the mitzvah misamachta b'chagecha. Tanya, we learned to the Brayso. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says, "Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam." When the Beis Hamikdash was around, ein simcha ela b'basar. The only way to make simchas yontif was only if you had meat, right? You have to have meat from the shlomim. Shnema v'savachta shlomim v'chalta sham v'samachta lifnei Hashem alikecha. So simcha is eating a carbon. Now she'ein Beis Hamikdash kayam. Now that there's no Beis Hamikdash, Ein Simcha Ela B'Yayin. That means there's no Simcha, only with wine. What he doesn't mean is that you don't have to eat meat on Yom Tov. But in the olden days, in the Beis Hamikdash, just having a shlomim was enough to be Mikayim the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. You did not need wine. Today, since we're eating chulin, not holy meat, but chulin meat, so then you have to add, to make the simcha, you have to have wine as well. Shenema, it says in the pasuk, v'yayin yisamach lavav enosh. The wine makes the person happy, and therefore you have to have wine as well. So they're very important. I hope people are makayim this. To have a novel wine for a meal of Yom Tov. Now we go on to a new sugya. Not a new sugya, but they didn't have, I guess, they didn't have a way to measure. I guess they made their own cups of wine. For their Seder, they didn't go to the Svarim store or the silver store and buy a becher. You made the cup at home. So the question is, how would you determine what a revius is? You live in this ancient place. There's no place to buy cups. How would you know what a revius wine is for your Seder, for the cups of Dalakoses? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, Kasta, the famous measuring cup, the Moiraisa that they measure fish brine in there. There was a famous measuring cup called Kasta, the Have Tzipori, that was in the city of Tzipori, was well known. He Haves Kamin Luga de Mikdasha. That is the size of a lug of the Beis Hamikdash. So that is the exact lug. So it was a common measuring cup. So now all you need is a quarter of a lug for each of the Dalet Koses. So you spill it into 4 cups. So you divide it into 4. With that kasta de maraisa, which apparently everybody had one, that they would measure out the revius of the Dalet Koses. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Tamnaisa, there was another measuring cup called the Tamnaisa. Not clear what it was used to measure, but it was also famous. But Kadmaisa, the Havid Tveria, the old ones, they had 2 ones. They had a new one and an old one. The old one was bigger than the new ones, exactly revius. Here you have, it was not a lug, it was exactly a revius, a lug bigger than the new ones. So let's read inside. Tamnaisa Kadmaisa, the new measuring cups of Tamnaisa, the Have Tiberia that was in Tiberia, Have Yasera Alda, it's bigger than the modern ones, river, by a quarter of a log. So Uba Mashai Revius shall Pesach, and there you Mashai a Revius of Pesach. What do? You fill up the old one with wine, so to speak, or whatever, a liquid, and then you pour it into the new one. Whatever remains in the old one, or whatever spills over, is exactly a Revius. So that's how they had a way to. I don't know how relevant that Gemara would be to us, but it just gives you an insight in how they used to live. Amar Rav Chizda made a comment. He said, Revius shel Torah, the Revius halug of the Torah is if you want to make your own cup, right? You don't have a cup at home. You want to make your own cup. So all you got to do is make a cup that is etzba'ayim. That's 2 fingers. I guess that's 2 thumbs. Al etzba'ayim. So it's a width and length of 2 fingers by 2 fingers. Barum, but make it the height. Etzba'ayim b'chatzi etzba b'chomish etzba. It has to be the height of 2 fingers, a half a finger, and another fifth. So 2.7 fingers. Something like that. So 2.7 fingers in height. 2 fingers by 2 fingers in the height of 2.7 fingers. Now, how did they come up with this idea? How did they know that's the size? So what the Gemara is going to say is, once we know what a mikveh size is, a mikveh, as you know, has to have 40 sa. But if I can make a vessel that could hold 40 sa, and that was a well-known vessel, then I can extrapolate mathematically to figure out from 40 sa what a revius, what's the size of a keli that could hold a revius. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Brisa says, "V'rochas b'mayim is kol b'sorei." You have to go into the mikvah. So first it says your entire flesh has to touch the water. The first drush is shlo yehei davar choitzis ben b'sorei l'mayim. Nothing should be interrupting between your flesh and the water. I mean, you can't wear a cast or a band-aid or something like that if you could take it off. But mayim, what does it mean? You wash in the water. The mei mikvah. It has to be water that was gathered there, not that you drew water from somewhere else and poured it here. It was gathered here like rainwater. Es kol basara. Here's the key. It has to be water that covers your entire body. That's a mikvah. So mayim shel kol gufa oila behem. The mayim that your entire body would cover. Now, how much is a mikvah that would cover your entire body? The kamahain. So now we go to kuf tes samach sheni. Amma al amma barum shalosh amma. If you have an amma by an amma, if you have a keli that's one amma by a one amma with a height of 3 ammas, that gives you the size. And if you fill it up with water, that's the size of a mikvah. The height over here is the height of a human being. Now, the human being is at least shalosh amas. Now, if you say that an amma is 2 feet, the average human being at that time, I guess, was 6 feet. And even 6 feet doesn't include his head. So people were very tall. I don't know when they, I'm not tall, but people were very tall. So a mikvah was an amma al amma, barum shalosh amas, with a height of 3 ammas. And how do you fit a 6'5" person in that mikvah? He bends over, he bends into the mikvah, of course, and dunk into that. V'shi'aru chachamim shi'ur mei mikvah aboim saw. And the shear that you could put into the main mikvah is 40 saw. Now, what does that have to do with what we're saying? Once I know that if you have amma al amma with a height of 3 ammas that could hold 40 saw with visual mathematics, that's what all this Rashbam is, I can extrapolate that if you want a revius, you can have 2 fingers by 2 fingers with a height of 2.7 fingers. So I'll point it out and show you how it's done. Very basically, the mikvah that we described that holds 40 saw, where my cursor is an amma by an amma, and it has 3 ammas height. As I said, that's about 6 feet. 3 ammas is 18 tefachim. If you divide the height of 18 tefachim into 16 parts, right, 16 cubes, that's how they visually divided it. In order, you'll see where we're going here. They divided this into 16 cubes. So you'll have, each cube will hold 2.5 saw, and each cube would have 2.5 saw, and the bottom would be tefach v'chatzi etzba, because if you put this in a if you take one of these amma al amma and the thickness of it, this would be a tefach and a chatzi etzba that will hold 2.5 saw. So 1 cube of all this would hold 2.5 saw. Total 40 saw, but each of these would hold 2.5 saw. Then we take it a little further. Let's say I just sliced off 2/5 of the top. What would it hold? It would hold a saw and a half. Amma al amma would hold a saw and a half, but the thickness would be, instead of this would be a tefach v'chatzi etzba, this would be 2 fingers, 2.5, 2.7 fingers, which is, ignore the number 13.5 and ignore the number 20.5, because I'm turning it back it's turned back into 2 fingers by half a finger by a fifth. That's 2.7. So basically, I just showed you right now, that's where I'm up to, that an amma of an amma with a height of 2.7 fingers will hold a saw and a half. Then you go to the next step. The next step is here. But amma al amma with 2.5 fingers would hold a saw and a half. That's 36 lugan, because a saw is 24 lugan plus another half would give you 36. Then if you got 36 lugan, you could divide this into 36 squares. You could get a square, which is a lug, a tefach by a tefach, which would hold a lug. Again, the height would be atzbayim 2.7 fingers, 2.7 fingers. So it would be a tefach by a tefach with a lug. Okay, so far so good. Now a lug is what you need for all 4 cups of wine. So if you want to know what is a reviusik lug for 1 cup of wine, which is that's all you need, is you got to take this and divide it into 4. So we go into step 4. You divide this into 4, and you get an etzba by 2 etzba by 2 etzba with a height of 2.7 etzba. That will hold a reviusik lug. So that's how we can do this on a calculator, but they didn't have calculators and they didn't have this visual. They had to visualize how to extrapolate from what the Gemara said, that a mikvah has, if you have an amma b'rum shalosh amas, that might be a lachal ma'ishim Sinai, that an amma by an amma with a height of 3 amas will hold 40 saw. With that, with dividing it, I could figure out that if you want to make a revius, all you got to do is make a vessel that holds 2 fingers by 2 fingers with a height of 2.7 fingers. Wow. Next Gemara.
That's amazing.
That's how it's visual math. And you know the contest, the real whizzes at math. They don't do math the way we do it. They see it in colors and pictures and visualize it. The ones that they can do, the mathemagicians they're called. I don't know if you've ever watched any of them perform, but the mathemagicians are really good in being able to, break it down into a picture and see it differently than you would. Amar Rav Ashi, Amali Rav ben Chinana. Rav Ashi said that Rav ben Chinana told me, Shulchan shel Migdash, the Shulchan that was in the Beis Hamikdash, shel Prakim Hava. You could take it apart like a Lego. Now, the Shulchan had to always be in the Beis Hamikdash because you always had to have bread on it. And so you can never take it out. Let's say it became Tameh. Let's say a kohen Tameh by accident touched it, and it could be Makabel Tamah. How would you toivel it? It always had to be in the Beis Hamikdash. And how could you toivel it? How could you take it? There was only in the Beis Hamikdash, there was these small mikvahs. The Isal Kedaitech Haduki Have Mahadek, it was one piece. So Amsa ba Amsa Hechem Etable. How would you be able to toivel an Amma by an Abba? It was just too big to fit into a mikvah. That's what the Gemara is trying to get at over here. It was just too big, and you had to be toivel it in the Beis Hamikdash. But there was presumably only very small mikvahs in the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says, "My kusha, what's your difficulty?" There was a mikvah that was very, very large in the Beis Hamikdash. It was called the Dilma B'Yam She'asa Shloima Hava Makbelei. There was like a swimming pool, an above ground pool, so to speak, that was somewhere in the Beis Hamikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. That was a kosher mikvah. It was a very large mikvah, and the Tanur Bei Rabbi Chia Yam She'asa Shloima Machzik Me'eh L'Chamisha Mikvah Tahara. The Yam, the big pool, swimming pool, the kosher mikveh that Shlomo made in his Beis Hamikdash could hold 150 times what a regular mikveh. So it's 150 times Amma by Amma Rum Shalosh Amma. So it was extraordinarily big. That was somewhere in the Beis Hamikdash where they could easily bring the shulchan. And mind you, they only brought the shulchan. They could only be toivel the shulchan on Shabbos, because during the week you always have to have the lechem upon him, tamid on it. Right? There's one time of the week where you take off the old lechem and you put the new lechem. During that time, that was the moment in time where it did not have lechem on it. That was the only time you could be toivel it. So you could not bring it outside the Beis Hamikdash to toivel, because that only happened on Shabbos, so we don't do tefillah on Shabbos. So they had to toivel in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's why in the Beis Hamikdash they had this massive mikvah that they used to toivel with, and that was called Yam She'asa Shloima. One more piece of Gemara, and then we'll stop. The Gemara says, "V'loy yivchaschu loy me'arba." You're not allowed to have less than 4. You should not give the ani less than 4 cups of wine. He has to be able to drink, right? So that's what they were misakin. So Gemara asks, and the whole idea of Dalit Koses, there is a halacha l'mayshim Sinai that you should not do things in pairs. It's not just for whatever reason is that if you do something in even numbers, you're opening yourself up to damage by demons, by mazikim. And therefore, you should avoid doing things in pairs. So the number 4 is an even number. So the Gemara asks, how could the Rabbanan establish something that could lead to a danger because of mazikim, right? Now, once the Chachamim established it, you could say, shoyba mitzvah, if it's a mitzvah, nothing bad will happen to you. But to make the original takana this way, that's the Gemara is troubled by it. It's zugais, and zugais are a problem. Well, Tanya, we learned in a braysa, lo yochel adam trey, a person should not eat 2 items of the same. Lo yishta trey, and should not drink 2 items that are exactly the same. Lo yikaneach, a person should not wipe himself in the restroom tray with twice. You should do it in an odd number. And here, v'lo yasa tzrochav trey. And here, you should not do relations with your wife twice in one evening. So therefore, you see that because there was a concern of doing things in 2s. So how did they establish this mitzvah of doing 4? Actually, it's 2 and 2 because there's 2 cups before the seder and 2 cups after the seder with the meal interrupting. So even if you want to say 4 is not a problem, but 2 is a problem. So Amar Rav Nachman, and this is what we'll end. Amakra, the pasuk says Leil Shimurim, the night that's always watched. Leil Hamashuma Uba Min Amazikim. Here's a night that is always protected. There's one night of the year that's guaranteed protection from demons and damage and spirits that can do damage, and that's this night. And halachically, we say that on the night of the seder, you don't say the normal extended Krishma Shalamita, if you say it, but you should say it, but with Hamalach and Vihinoyam and everything like that before you go to sleep. You don't have to say that. On the night of the Seder, all you have to say is Shema, if you didn't work Yotze, and 1 Parsha Shema, and the Hamapil, and that's it. Because you're for sure protected, so you don't need extra psukim to say for protection. So since we know that for generations, the night of the Seder is a protective night, nothing bad can happen, and therefore, the Chachamim felt comfortable being misakin that you should do daled kaises, and even if it's 2 and 2. One point I'll tell you is that we learned v'layasut tzrochav trei. You'd have to examine this because you shouldn't do. We learned in the Masechta Erevim that if you do twice with your wife, you're guaranteed to have children who are zecharim. The Gemara, if I remember, says if you want to make your boys, you want to guarantee you'll have males, you should do it twice. And here the Gemara says, don't do it twice. I guess you have to be totally l'shem shemayim to do it twice. And here we're talking about stam. That's the only thing I could think of over that. Generally,
we do other things. I mean, we have Lechem Mishnah, the woman lights 2 candles. There's so many other things that we do too.
That's a great question. It's a great shacha v'shamar. Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to see how this Gemara develops and how they establish that when it deals with the mitzvah. I can tell you that, let's say, Monday is always a hard day. For whatever reason, you can never have a happy Monday, you know? It's always a hard day because, as you know, from the Chumash, on Monday, Hashem did not write Kitov in the Pasuk. Kitov was written on Tuesday. There's no Kitov on Mondays. Monday is a harder day. Anything to do with 2s stands for like God is one, unity, one. And when you start dealing with 2s, it's a breakup of the a breakup of the unity that leads to the mazikin being able to have such power. One other point I want to point out to you is what Tosfos writes over here. We learned before that the mikvah was ama barom sholish amas. So the height of the human being was 3 amas. There is an expression in the Targum in the Megillah's Esther, that they hung all of Haman's sons on that one tree that was 50 amas. On 50 amas, they hung 10 people. Now, 10, and they left a space of 2 amas in between, something like that. So, according to that cheshbon, right? According to that cheshbon, it would be impossible to hang them all on one tree if the head is not counted. In other words, Taisa says, look at Taisa, the koimas adam sholosh amas below roish. Taisa says, when I say the height of a person is 3 amas, 6 feet, that's not including his head. And therefore, whatever he says over here, he needed something else for the roish. So, and then he says, Ubatargum in the Megillah, the Choshev Sholish Amos L'chol Echad. You look at the Targum; they hung all of Chaman's kids on the tree. How did they hang them all on the tree? It wouldn't fit if the human being is taller than 3 amas. So Taisa says, Ketuye Roishaya. All of Haman's children's heads were cut off. So what was left was their body from the neck down. And that's how it was able to fit all 10 kids on that tree. And hence you say in the Shoshanis, V'roiv banav alo eitz talisa. Most of Haman's kids was hung on the tree. Because as Taisus just told you from the Targum, that Kituyi Roishaya, when they hung Haman's kids, their heads were cut off. So that's how they were exactly the height of 3 amas each. They were able to set them up nicely on that tree.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, we'll continue on this sugya of zugos and mazikin and see what it gives us to answer.
Yeshukach.
Okay.
Uh,
Good night.
Good night.